What's the cost of living in Northern Virginia? So you're relocating to Northern Virginia. Congratulations, that's awesome. But you might be wondering to yourself, how does it compare to where I'm living right now? I'm Zach Wessolleck and I'm a real estate agent here in Northern Virginia, and I hope to give you an idea about what the cost of living looks like, and you can make that comparison for yourself for planning purposes. So I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Depending on where you're moving from, Northern Virginia is possibly going to be quite a bit more expensive. We're just outside of Washington, D.C., which is a more expensive area, so naturally that trickles into the Northern Virginia metro area. The upside of that is that because we are so close to DC and all of the government agencies and the companies that are in that area, it creates a stronger job market for us. So that's just some of the trade-off that you get with the high cost of living because there are more higher paying jobs and a lot more job opportunities in the Northern Virginia DC area. But I'll save some of that comparison for another time. Let's jump right into some of the numbers about what you can expect for a cost of living in Northern Virginia. The first one is the one I am most familiar with, and that is housing. So as of October of 2023, the median home price in Northern Virginia is $634,900. So just under $635,000. And that is homes that have sold. Whereas in September of 2023, according to Redfin, the median home price across the United States is at $412,000. So that is quite a significant jump, with Northern Virginia being a little bit over $200,000 more expensive than the median home across the United States. Now, this does cover all types of homes, whether that be single family, townhouses, or condominiums. So those price points are going to vary based on what you're looking at. And another caveat with Northern Virginia is that it is a very large geographic area with multiple counties. So the median price point in those different counties are going to vary. And typically the further south you go, the cheaper it is going to get. So Arlington County, which sits just outside of Washington, D.C., is going to be significantly more expensive than you would get in Prince William County, which is about 30 miles outside of DC. A lot of that comes down to the convenience of how long you sit in traffic or take public transportation. If you've done some of your research, you probably know that traffic in the Northern Virginia DC metro area is pretty terrible. So the closer you can get, the more convenient it is for your commute if you are going into the DC and surrounding area. You just have to pick your poison, and ultimately, if you're looking at affordability, just know that you might have to live further outside of DC if you don't want to pay those higher premium prices. Now that we've talked about commuting, let's talk a little bit about how the price of transportation varies in Northern Virginia compared to the rest of the country. Honestly, gas is pretty on par with the average price for the rest of the country. When I looked this morning, it was at about $3.13, the national average, and in Northern Virginia, it was just under $3.20. So gas is pretty on par, and the real kicker there is just how much time you have to spend in traffic. Now, public transportation is where the kicker is in the Northern Virginia DC area. Based on the cost of living index, which is an index that shows the variety of different cost of living expenses across the country and across different categories, with 100 being the national average, the Northern Virginia metro area came in at about 139. So that is a pretty good jump from the national average. So public transportation, the metro system, is more expensive compared to other areas in the country. And the next closest metro area that I looked at to compare it to was Norfolk, Virginia, which is a couple hours south of Northern Virginia. And that cost of living average came out to 82.5. So it's about 40% higher than the next closest metro area. And another thing to be mindful of if you are working in DC or Arlington or anything like that is that a lot of times there are parking fees associated with those areas. So you would pay for a monthly membership to a garage or something like that. So really weigh that into your calculations when you're deciding whether to go the public transportation route or driving in yourself and avoiding that public transportation. Because even though gas is pretty on par with the national average, it doesn't factor in those monthly parking fees that you might have to incur. And I also want to talk to you about the cost of groceries. Now, in Northern Virginia, the cost of groceries are a little bit higher than the national average, and a lot of that can be contributed to the fact that we have more boutique or higher end grocery stores than a lot of other areas. Based on the numbers I found, the yearly average for groceries in the Northern Virginia area is about $3,500 a year, whereas the national average ranges from $2,800 to $3,200. So we do definitely fall on the higher end of that spectrum, and we exceed the higher end of that average. So groceries do tend to be more expensive in Northern Virginia, but you can alleviate that just by choosing whatever kind of store you want to go to. If you go to a more boutique store, then you're probably going to have to pay higher prices, whereas you can go to your average run-of-the-mill supermarket and get slightly lower prices. I personally am a fan of Aldi myself. They've never done wrong by me, so that's just my personal choice. Now, in regards to eating out, the prices are definitely higher in our area. I mean, we're probably more on par with what you might see in New York City or Disney. I mean, honestly, the prices were about the same as when I went there. Now, this is just based on my personal experience, not necessarily numbers that I found, but the cost of eating out and going out and getting drinks is going to be more on par with what you might see in the higher end luxury metro areas. The closer you get to DC, the more expensive those meals are going to be, whereas you can go to an area more like Woodbridge or Dumfries and you can probably get a cheaper meal than going to Old Town Alexandria or Crystal City in Arlington. But there's no way around it. Eating out is definitely more expensive in Northern Virginia. We've covered the big three topics of housing prices, transportation and travel, and groceries and food. I hope you have a little bit of an idea about how Northern Virginia might compare to wherever it is you're moving from. And if you or someone you know are moving to Northern Virginia and you need any help at all, feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to help you out however I can. Don't forget to subscribe to the page if you want to be kept up to date on all things Northern Virginia.